So these two gentlemen, if you don't know, are very opinionated on AI. So this is hopefully is going to be really spicy. Okay, so let's start with you, Luca. Just give us a quick overview of Shop Circle.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So Luca Cartacchini, founder of Shop Circle. Shop Circle is a holding company operating in the technology space. So in Europe, there are 20,000 software companies above 2 million ARR, but only 20 reach through scale, right? So to us, like, we created Shop Circle as an alternative to VC, because the VC model simply doesn't work for 99.9% of the companies out there. So we created Shop Circle with the idea to buy software companies subscale between 3 to 15 million ARR and modernize them for the AI era, make them appealing for the new enterprise era, which is increasingly expanding towards AI. We closed $200 million over the last 5 years, 16 acquisitions, and AI is at the foundation of everything we do.
How many acquisitions have you made this year?
Yeah, we closed 2, and we aim to close the year with 5, 6 just this year.
Like Bending Spoons?
Yeah, Bending Spoon is a fellow Italian, right? They operate in the B2C software space. We do B2B software, but yes, the model is somewhat similar. We buy and we never sell. It's a permanent holding, yeah.
Okay, Sean, Zapier, bit overview, please.
Yeah, hi, and thanks for having us. So, yeah, I'm one of the founders at Zapier, and we founded Zapier on a really simple thesis, which was that every organization in the world needed to know who they were doing business with. Simple as that. Doesn't matter whether you're investing in people or organizations, you're taking investment from those people or organizations, you're putting these people on your board, or you bring these organizations into your supply chain. In all those situations, you need to know and form an informed decision on what that organization or individual would mean for you, your company, your reputation, how you do business, to check if it's compatible. We took that process from days to minutes, and we're an AI deep tech company.
Okay, yeah, okay. So let's start with you, Sean. So there's lots of talk about AI-powered decisions, but in regulated industries, how do you actually make an AI decision defensible? And, well, before that, I've skipped the question. You're building AI that sits between raw data and humans making high-stakes decisions. Can you describe this decision layer? What is actually, and what's the hardest part to get right?
Yeah, so I think we often sort of think about the decision layer being that sort of interface between the AI sort of black box and the human kind of making the final kind of choice. And I think in reality, I just don't think it's quite as simple as that. I think decisions are at every single layer in the system, and it always has been. This is not an AI thing. This is as old as systems ever. You think about the systems that took the Apollo 13 people to the moon. There are huge numbers of systems that sit behind it, and they all find and collect information and data, they extract the information and knowledge from that, and they make calls, they make judgments. In the past you'd call it algorithms. Now it's slightly, it's a slightly higher level kind of concept. But in all those situations, it's about taking data, processing it, and coming up with an answer. And that's ultimately what a decision is, right? And systems layer those things up, and then ultimately at some point a human then is going to make a kind of, usually, and certainly today, a human would make the final call, especially if in some form of safety critical situation, on what the ultimate answer is. And I think it just kind of, it opens up the opportunity for us all to think, well, actually, where do we want the humans, and exactly what does making a decision mean, and what do you base that on? So ultimately, it doesn't really matter whether it's AI or some older algorithm, or frankly something that will come in the future. That the idea of this stack of processing information to derive intelligence or information or insight, and then the basis upon which somebody or something processes that's really that decision layer.
Okay, so slightly switching focus, Luke. We're hearing a lot about AI that acts rather than just informs. As software starts making more decisions instead of just displaying information, does that fundamentally expand the market?
Right. So we have a very well-defined thesis on the topic. Basically, in my opinion, excluding the infrastructure layer, so think about OpenAI, think about Claude, think about Gemini, all the other AI applications will converge at some point with software that embedded AI into their application as well. And combined, they will create an asset class which is significantly larger than the previous one. At the moment, the global software market is quantified being like around 1 trillion, and then you have the global labor market, which is 60 trillion instead, right? If you take the view that software will, and enabled by AI, will take more from the global labor market, then it's not difficult to imagine and anticipate a software market which expands from 1 trillion to 5, 10 trillion, right? Because like you say, the main difference is in the past, software used to be a system of records. So displaying information, storing information. The gradual shift that all the software companies are going towards is actually taking decision based on the system of records, so what you call system of action, right? And that's what we're doing at ShopCircle as well. We're taking system of records and gradually modernize them for the AI era. So it's only natural to assume and actually estimate that the global software market will be a much larger one, which is, it goes against the thesis that says, the SaaS apocalypse where all the software is going to die, because in my opinion, the evolution that AI is witnessing is actually making software stronger over the long term, because you already control the distribution. It's very embedded in the workflow of the clients, and then it's a matter of like adding more value, and with AI you can do that. So answering to your question, yes, in my view, it's the biggest shift and probably tailwind that the digital world, technology, have seen over the last 20, 30 years.
You've got quite a contrarian view, because as you say, that's kind of against the received wisdom. So what were those figures? You said 1 billion to 5 billion, was it? Or?
Yeah, we published something on our website this morning about that, a report that estimates going up over time from 1 trillion to 5.
Okay,
I think actually, yeah. I mean, I think just thought. I think what we definitely see is, it's very easy to think about AI replacing things, replacing what the humans are doing. They were onboarding a customer. Well, they would spend some time researching that, and making some choices and some decisions on that. And have we replaced them? Well, yes, you have replaced the research part of that. But actually, the interesting thing is, when you use technology like AI to take the speed and the cost out of it, but also to layer in a new level of trust and accountability at fantastic levels of detail through the system, we say, well, actually, what you can then do is you can start to take something you would have just done on maybe 10 companies that were at the final stage of your process, whether you're onboarding them as suppliers or customers. It was a compliance activity. Well, instead, you can take it right upstream and go, you know what? I've got 1,000 organizations I'm considering partnering with and doing business with. Well, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to run the research at that point. And you know what, this 30% of the companies here, we could never work with them. Their values are not aligned. There's these things that have happened here. You know what, let's just focus. And so hence it's about doing things at scale you could never do before, and focusing hence on the value earlier in the process. So it just moves, but it moves for the value of the customer.
Okay, just let's go back to the due diligence point. So you've talked about due diligence going down from weeks to minutes. And what does that actually change about the speed of how businesses operate then?
Yeah, it enables them to do things, to be bolder, to move faster. The world is moving very quickly around organizations. You'll see, there's been quite a lot of talk today about people who've built their own Claude systems to do something, or they've got an off-the-shelf kind of system to do something else. When when all of your competition are exploiting those kind of tools to build something, well, then actually it's like, if you're not exploiting those systems, then you are by definition falling behind, or they have the opportunity to spot an opportunity or a threat and exploit that to your disadvantage in the market. So it's absolutely about equipping yourself with the right tools early, but really importantly, and I think probably the key point for me is, this is not just about can we answer questions. It's about the trust. So would a compliance officer, or would you on the board of that organization, will you stake your career, your reputation on that answer that was generated by that system? And that's a question of trust.
Luca, you're nodding there for that?
No. Yes, for us, we take due diligence very seriously. We do acquisition all the time. I see difficult to go from months to minutes, but it can definitely be streamlined. There is a lot that you can be streamlining, like we do AI-powered due diligence as well, especially when it comes to the financials, the drafting of the contracts. There is a lot that you can streamline. But more importantly for us is try to acquire companies and assessed during the due diligence process that are AI defensible and things that you can power with AI after acquisition, which basically means, you don't want to go, in our case, specifically for software, you want to go for software companies that have access to proprietary data. You want to buy software companies that have network effects, so increasing the number of supplier or users that utilize the platform, the actual value of the platform increase. An element of hardware and service, which is very counterintuitive. In the past, we used to say only recurring revenue count for software. Now, actually, people look at it and say, service and hardware can be replaced by AI most of the time, so they make the software companies more defensible. And the last point is also like operating in highly regulated industry, like you were saying before, right? If you operate in healthcare or like you provide software for government, it's simply not going to be possible to vibe code a solution in a matter of seconds and then provide it to these clients. So I agree on the financial due diligence, the legal due diligence being automated, but there are certain things that require a bit more time, and they're not always quantitative, right? They could be qualitative, all these points, and you can assign a score, but you need to spend time with the management, the company to understand it a bit better. You guys probably focus a bit more on the financial due diligence, I guess, or?
Is it actually a bit more on the sort of reputational due diligence, and all the shades of grey of all the things that have gone on or been reported on? And I think the challenge is actually, when you think about any organisation, there'll be another 10 or 15 organisations out there globally with the same name, and certainly for people, there'll be hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And actually, how you resolve it, and hence how you bring a level of confidence to the fact that actually the news article or the sanction that related to this is actually the one you're doing business with. And I think that's one of the really interesting kind of questions, because if you get that wrong, it undermines the whole thing. And obviously, a single box solution is only too happy to kind of try and talk about whatever you ask it to do, and that's why it's about having this network of decisions and the validity and the traceability right back to source.
A good segue to that. I mean, we've been pretty upbeat on AI. Is who, if the AI does go awry, who's accountable in your organisations then if it does go wrong? I mean, could you talk a bit about the whole how the governance keeps pace with that, the kind of human governance?
Yeah, like for us, we look at the AI implementation on two fronts. Like the first one is automation. So think about customer support. 60-70% of our tickets have now been automated, especially when they are on a chat versus like a phone call. In that case, how does it work? You automate the initial part, and then if the client doesn't find an answer, it can simply escalate to a person, right? So like it's the classic human in the loop situation. The AI take care of the foundation, of the basics, and then the human can escalate that. When it comes to development, for instance, is different because you have almost like a co-pilot which helps the developer, but ultimately the developer is still responsible to push the code, right, in a way, so it's still the ultimate responsible. It just, you can get done much more with a less amount of people. And then there is the innovation part, which is integrating AI into existing products. But even in that case, you're interacting with the software, but ultimately you're going to be speaking with the account manager, the customer support team. So there is always like a person in the loop. I think the quality of company is made by its people, but when people are combined with the best technology, which in this case needs to be AI as well, is the combination that we're going for. But you still need to have humans in the loop, especially in our industry where it's highly enterprise.
I feel as though you're going to say something very similar, Sean.
Look, I mean, absolutely, but I think we're a little, in our world, we're a little bit lower into the detail, possibly. Because we're a little bit more algorithmic in our world. So, I think the key things for us, and I think this goes across many systems, right? Is in this sort of LLM world, is the sort of really three parts we focus on. Is accuracy. Is the information correct, right? It's consistency. If I asked you to generate the same thing, if I gave you the same inputs, would you give me the same outputs? How likely is that to happen? And it's the explainability.
Which is a problem with most of the AI tools, right? Because it's not deterministic. So every time you can ask the same question, it provide completely different answer.
Exactly that. So whilst we harness this kind of world of information that these systems have learned on and trained on, and that's incredible, for example, for matching names or doing all sorts of things, or understanding the nuance of financial crime in a particular sector, actually, and we really leverage that. That's it. The very fact that these systems are probabilistic by design as opposed to deterministic by design it's a really interesting mindset when you're designing those systems, and we very much apply the same concepts that you'd apply to safety critical systems. It's like, well, actually, how do you get one system? How do you use one set of algorithms to make an assertion based on some inputs, and how do you use a completely different model then to validate that, given that input, that end assertion actually hangs together? I've got there's a really nice example here. In some of the early days when we were sort of testing and validating our system, right. It said, "Oh, this oligarch, he loves, his passion is swimming. He loves swimming." It's like, well, actually behind that, when you looked at the sourcing, there was nothing that actually said he loved swimming. He owned the largest private swimming pool in the country, but that was a leap. And it's those levels, those little micro decisions, and without that traceability, that accuracy, that explainability, then that's where things would ordinarily start to unpick themselves.
Right, that's a really nice anecdote to finish. We only got through half of what was on the slate because you were both so articulate. So can we have a big hand for both Luca and Sean, please? That was great.
Thank you, John.